Hey guys, it's Jeff from Patriot Training Center. Today's video we're going to talk about getting an acceptable sight picture. So if you come and train with us, you'll hear this saying a lot: the sights control the speed of the trigger. And sight verification is a very big deal when it comes to shooting accurately when we're talking about the fundamentals of marksmanship. So TrainingSights.com made this excellent training aid right here of front sight post and a rear notch right here that we can use when we're talking about shooting with iron sights. So when we're looking at getting an appropriate sight picture, if we're looking for a picture perfect sight picture, we're looking for equal height and equal light. What I mean by that is this front sight post needs to be centered perfectly in that rear notch with equal height, meaning it's lined up on top, and we have equal light in between right there. And that is a perfectly aligned 3-dot sight picture. So for example, when we're looking at the target here, like we have our Patriot Training Center target, and if we're going for a shot into our head box, this shot, if we do our job and we press the trigger without disturbing that sight picture right there, we're going to make a pretty good hit right there in the head box. Same thing if we move down here into the thoracic cavity. So that is extremely important when we're talking about making a good hit. So one of the problems is when we get this sight alignment off, that actually throws our sights off. And the closer we are, the more we can get away with. But the further back we go, the more those errors in the sight alignment start to show up. So for example, if I have this perfect sight alignment right here, if I do my job again with a good grip and a good trigger management, and I press that trigger without disturbing the sights, I'm going to make a good hit. But yet, if I have my sights up, for example, and I have this front post high above the rear notch, that's going to impact high. So if we look here on the target, we see that this shot is actually going to impact much higher than it would if we had that perfect sight alignment sight picture. Same can be said if we actually move the sights to your right or my left as the shooter. Even though I have equal height, I don't have that equal light, and the front post is moved over to the left. So obviously that shot is going to impact to the left. No different if we move it to the shooter's right all the way over. That shot is going to impact to the right. And then the inverse, if we got the thing lined up perfectly but we're low, obviously that's going to impact low. And again, the further back we go on the distances, the more these errors start to show up on the target. So at 3 yards, we can get away with a lot more than we can at 5 and 7 yards. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little demonstration at those distances. At 3 yards, we'll give you a perfect sight alignment sight picture, see where that hits, and then we'll start moving these things around and show how that impacts at these different distances. All right, so we're at the 3-yard line, and we're going to go ahead and take a look and see what happens when we start moving those sights around. For comparison, what I'm going to do on the very first shot is I'm going to try to get that perfect equal height, equal light, good sight alignment, good sight picture, good grip, good trigger management, and put that shot right dead center in the middle of that circle that represents the thoracic cavity on our Patriot Training Center target. And then we will move the sights around and show that deviation at the 3-yard line. So there we go. All right, pretty good shot right there. We got that pretty much in the middle. So we had a good sight alignment, good sight picture, good trigger management. We made the hit. Now I'm simply going to move the front post all the way to the right and see how that impacts on the target. All right, as we see at 3 yards, we got about 2.5 inches of movement to the right. Now we'll do the same thing and move that front post to the left. And we pretty much see the same result. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the front post high. It's going to be lined up, but it's going to be sitting high. Let's see what happens there. Woo, as we see, even at 3 yards with that front sight high, we see we get a pretty high hit. And that's still acceptable at 3 yards, but it's not really where we want it. So let's see what happens when we move it straight down. And as we see there, pretty much the same thing. That shot really takes a nosedive. Okay, so this time I'm going to move the front sight post high right. All right, and as we see there, I've got out of the circle. Okay, So we'll do the same thing and repeat high left. A little bit more acceptable shot right there, but we're still not really where we want to be. All right, so the same thing we'll see here when we move this thing down to the right. And then down to the left. All right, so let's walk up here and take a look. And as we see here, even at 3 yards, we've got a lot of deviation of the impacts of the sights right there. So right here in the middle, we got the first shot that hit pretty much dead middle right here. That was perfect, equal height, equal light. The shot went right where we wanted it. When we moved that front post all the way to the right, it moved it a good 2 inches. Same thing to the left. But the real trouble came when we had that sight either jacked up or moved down dramatically, and we see the difference in the impacts that it made high and low, even at 3 yards. Now, we're gonna move back to 5 yards and watch how these groups really start to expand. All right, guys, so we've moved back to the 5 yard line here, and we're gonna see how these groups start to open up. And just a reminder of what we're doing here. So with our trainingsights.com training aid right here, we'll see equal height, equal light. That's the sight picture we want, okay? So the first shot will be that. And if I do my job, I'll pretty much hit dead center where I'm aiming. And then we're gonna move it all the way to the right, all the way to the left. We're gonna move it high right, high middle, high left, low middle, low right, low left. So we'll get to see where these rounds impact and how much difference that really makes. And again, we saw at 3 yards, it can be a pretty big difference. We'll really see that start to open up here at 5 and 7 yards. And then we'll talk about why that's so important. So here we go. Let's see what we can do at 5 yards. All right, equal height, equal light. All right, a little bit off to the left. So I need a little work on my support hand grip right there on that shot, but for the most part, we'll take that hit. So let's move that front sight post to the right and see what happens. All right, there we go. We can already see that was dramatically different than the 3 yard line, so we'll move it to the left. And there's a really good example. Now that front sight post was moved a little bit more than I meant for it to be, but it was still within where I could see it, but it was still moved to the left. And you see, we've got a hit that's not a good hit. That's not a fight stopping hit. It's not what we're looking for. So now we're gonna move it high right. All right, as we see, and we'll see if you can't see from here, but we're up at the outer edge of the circle. So now we're gonna go high middle, high left. All right, we're on the borderline of acceptable hits, but we're getting out of that range. So now let's see what happens when we go to the bottom and move that front post down into the middle, right and left. Whew. Yeah, let's walk up here and take a look. We really started to see that open up. Okay. So here is the initial sight picture that was a good sight picture. It's a little bit left, so I think I needed to tighten my support hand grip just a little bit to move that over here where I really want it, but it's a very acceptable hit. When I moved the front post to the right, you see we moved pretty far to the right, but then we really see it open up when we move this to the left. So I want to show you again what I was seeing on these two shots, okay? So when I'm shot this shot, that's what I saw, okay? But when we see this shot that was a complete miss, I moved it to here, where I could see basically half of the front sight. It was still lined up horizontally, but you can see how far that actually pushed the shot off target, and it's a complete miss. And then for this shot here, what you were seeing was, that was my sight picture. So we're still in that 8-inch circle, but we're very borderline of that not being a very effective hit. And same thing when we moved it here. We get this hit here at the very top. And then when I moved it left, I was right here. All right, so you see that variation. But here at the bottom is where it really gets tricky. So this initial first shot, This is the sight picture that I was seeing, right? Now this shot is below the 8-inch circle. It's still within an A zone, but that's a hit in the abdominal area, and that's probably not going to do much to stop our threat. But here's where it really gets interesting. So now I have moved these front sight posts low and completely out of the rear notch. And you can see this is off target. We may get a peripheral hit. Same thing when we moved it to the left. And what I saw on this sight picture for this shot here was that right there, okay? And we see how far that actually even came off of target. All right, so we're really starting to see how those groups start to move and open up. I'm gonna do the exact same thing here at 7 yards on this next target, and we're gonna see probably even more deviation right here than we did there. All right, so we're back here at the 7-yard line, and we're gonna do the same drill. I'm just gonna run through it, gonna try to put one in the middle, and I'm gonna deviate those sights, high right, left, middle, low left, right, middle. Then we'll go take a look and see what happens. Wow, you're gonna see a big difference. I'm really good with that shot. All right, perfect, equal height, equal light. I've got a pretty good solid shot right there, particularly with the sun in my eyes. I'm not unhappy with that. Moved it to the right just a little bit, and we see there, look what happened when I moved it to the left, okay? So what you're seeing here is no different than what we just saw right there. This hit that is completely over in the left arm was this sight picture right here. That's how big of a difference that made, just moving that right there, okay? And the rest are self-explanatory. When we get back to that 21 foot, that 7-yard line, which is basically the distance of a normal room in a normal house or a car, which is a good fighting distance, we see how big this group opens up. And we only have 2 acceptable hits out of 9 rounds fired. So that's very problematic. Now here's why this is so important. If you look at the gunfights, we can take John Korea's active self-protection. We can take stats from range master students in the past that have been in actual real life gunfights. And we can take stats from FBI agents who are often caught up in a lot of things on the streets because they're in plain clothes. So they actually end up in gunfights, and we have those statistics. A lot of those gunfights were taking place at 3, 5, and 7 yards. So that's why this drill is so important, and why it's so important that we make a very serious conscious effort to focus on our sight alignment, sight picture, trigger management, and those fundamentals of shooting. And as we see here, really at this 7-yard line, how big those groups start to open up with just that little bit of movement with those front sight posts. And when they're not at that equal height, equal light, it's really hard. Now the difference is, if you go back to the 3, when we were looking at it and when we were talking about it, we can have much more of an unacceptable sight picture at those distances because we don't see the effects. At that short distance, it doesn't have that much time to expand those groups. But again, the proof is in the 7-yard line, and even at the 5, when we start seeing these groups really start to open up. Now, of course, for the purpose of this drill, we were intentionally deviating these sights, and that's not what we're going to be doing in real life. But if we're not taking time to be conscious about our sight alignment, sight picture, and our trigger management, this is what we end up having happen. So that's why it's so crucially important, and why we can learn from a drill such as this. All right, guys, so we've seen what happens when we intentionally move those sight posts over and how the shots start to deviate when we don't have that acceptable sight picture. So now I'm going to show that with actual shooting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come at 3, 5, and 7 yards, and I'm actually going to shoot 3 or 4 rounds at each distance at the cadence that I can hit with an acceptable sight picture and still keep it into the area that I'm looking to get to. So on our Patriot Training Center target, we have a 8-inch circle with a square in the middle that is darker, and that's representing that mediastinum area, spine box. That's where I ideally want to keep my shots. So I'm going to show you what that looks like for me, for my acceptable sight picture at 3, 5, and 7 yards, and how that varies from the drill we just showed you. So I'm going to start out here with about 3 or 4 good rounds at a good pace here at 3 yards, and we'll see where they hit. All right, so there's 3 rounds at 3 yards at a pretty decent clip. I don't have a shot timer out here, but that's a decent split right there. And we see I could actually speed that up. If we walk up here and take a look at the target, I'm very good with that. That's the 3 hits that I'm looking for right there. So I was able to run that through pretty quick because at 3 yards, I'm able to take that flash sight picture, verify those sights, and press that trigger pretty quick. And what I mean by a flash sight picture is I'm getting the gun up to my eye target line and I'm seeing enough of those sights to know that those hits are going to be right there where I want them, and I can go ahead and break that shot. So as you see, as I move back at 5 and 7 yards, that cadence will slow down, especially at 7 yards. So we'll walk back here and see what that looks like. So here we are at 5. We're obviously 2 yards further back, 6 feet right here, and that cadence is going to have to slow down a little bit. All right, let's go take a look. All right, so we're chewing it up. I'm happy with that. So the cadence was just a little bit slower than it was at 3 yards. And again, I can go a little bit quicker if I need to, because obviously that group's pretty tight right there. But still, there's no such thing as misses. There's unintended hits, right? So I want to make sure when I'm having to use this tool that I am making hits and putting them where they need to be. I need to stop that threat, and I'm accountable for every round I fire. So as we move back to 7 yards here, we'll see an even slower cadence. Let's go see how we did. All right, so even though we had a slower cadence, we see the group open up just a little bit right there. But the hits are still in the acceptable zone. To be perfectly honest, I'd like these to be more up here, a little bit more to the right, but those are in the area where I want them. Those are effective hits. If nothing else, I've started the timer. I've got good hollow point rounds into that mediastinum area where all those great valves in the heart's located, and hopefully this threat's gonna stop very quickly. So you see the difference, 3, 5, 7 yards, how quickly we could take that flash sight picture at 3 yards, even at 5 yards to an extent, get the gun up to the eye target line, see what we need to see, and start breaking that shot. But as we get back to 7 yards, you see that slows down because I have to take that time to verify that sight picture before I go ahead and break that shot. So that's sight deviation and what happens when you start moving back and groups start opening up when we lose that sight alignment, and that's why it's so crucially important. So I hope you got something out of this, and we hope to see you training at Patriot Training Center soon.